Just 6 days into 2025, we have seen the latest economic development that is driving politics and the future of the world in Canada. On the morning of Monday, January 6th, the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau resigned after a 9-year term. Seemingly heartbroken, in his own words, he said the following: "This country deserves a real choice in the next election, and it has become clear to me that if I am having to fight internal battles, I cannot be the best option." But is it really his internal conflicts that's causing this problem? As it turns out, it might not be. Trudeau's popularity has been crashing year over year in the recent months and years leading up to this moment in January. And if we take a step back and look at the situation as a whole, we start to see a similar behavior to what happened with the recent US election not even 3 months ago. Hi everyone, my name is Tyler. I'm the founder and head editor of Wealth and Wisdom on LinkedIn and Substack, and today we're going to be talking about Trudeau's resignation, what the economics say about it, and what Canada has to look forward to. What's coming next for them as we move into 2025? Obviously, with the resignation of the current sitting Prime Minister and a no confidence vote in 54 days, the Liberal Party is not looking optimistic. But how did we get here? After 2015, it seemed like Trudeau had the entire country in his pocket. What changed? As we've seen in other places around the world, from the United States to the UK, to South Korea, Portugal, Panama, Austria, and the list goes on and on, Canadians are fed up with the story that they have been living since 2015. And the reasoning is the same. Just like with the United States recently, Canadians are upset with the Prime Minister over cost of living, immigration concerns, and economic prospects. Let's start by taking a look at this graph here. Over the past year, since 2022 really, the Canadian unemployment rate has been rising. It stayed stubbornly higher than the 4% unemployment rate that we see in the United States. So already this kind of flies in the face of what Trudeau has been saying this whole time. How the economy is strong, they're seeing a wonderful recovery. If that's the case, why is 6.5% of the population unemployed? To put that into perspective, anything higher than 4 in the United States is cause for concern, and they're sitting 2.5% above that. Well, the ultimate reason happens to be actually not as clear of a story as we've seen in the United States. When we're looking at wage growth specifically, Canadians experienced 22% wage increase since 2019, so they're making more money than ever before. But when you dig a little bit deeper, the story tells us something else. Let's start by looking at this moment right here. Even though Canadians are making more than they ever have before, they have been battered over and over again by expenses. Here on this graph, we see the increase year over year per quarter for Canada's housing and their consumer prices. What sticks out to you? What immediately jumped out to me was the fact that in many cases, 7 to be specific, since 2022, the Canadian housing and the Canadian regular consumer expenses had an inverse relationship when it comes to increasing in price. That means at every point in those 7 periods, Canadians were paying more for something than ever before. And that can get exhausting. We already saw this in the United States, and the leading opposition leader, Pierre Poilievre, has said very similar comments about the economy. But the story doesn't end there either. Yes, wages have grown over the 5 years since the pandemic, but so have Canada's costs. The Canadian CPI index, which measures inflation when it comes to consumer goods, rose 18% over the same period, and Canadian housing grew by 20%. Seems really pessimistic, but it doesn't stop there. You see, for most of the time that Trudeau has been in office, Canadians have been paying substantially more than their US counterparts, thanks to this one graph that we see here. This is the price per liter of gasoline in US dollars from 2015 till today. What do you notice? Canada has been paying more than the US for gasoline. In fact, at the worst part, using December's numbers, they were paying 133% more per liter. What people don't realize, and I've talked about this before, is that costs don't just disappear. 9 times out of 10, when a input like gasoline goes up in price, that price moves forward through the rest of the economy and eventually hits consumer bank accounts. This is pretty much how it works. In December, Canada had to pay 133% more for a liter of gasoline than the US did. So that 133% more that was charged to gas stations to buy the fuel is now being charged at the pump. Canadian trucking companies and other freight companies don't want to eat that cost either, so they charge 133% more to move goods and freight across the country. That raises a huge problem for wholesalers who still have to make a profit. So where does that 133% go? On to the next step in line. They charge 133% more to retailers and grocers to purchase their inventory. And of course, with retailers not wanting to be the ones to burden that cost either, they raise their prices 133%. This misses a lot of the complexity of what really happens in markets today, but you're starting to get the idea. As prices go up at the bottom of the value chain, everyone else suffers. Hi there, Tyler here, interrupting the video just for a minute to say thank you so much for watching up to this point. If you're finding this video valuable and getting something out of it, then I just wanted to let you know that there is a lot more over at our newsletter on LinkedIn and Substack with the links I have here on screen. Typically, I make about 1 video a month on this kind of content. And over there, I write 8 articles a month, about 2 a week, full of interesting insights on business, economics, finance, and anything else that I think might seem interesting and useful. Also, if you are liking the content up to this point and you would like to help me grow this out further, then please consider pledging your support on Substack with our monthly subscription. I will be coming out with some member exclusive content very soon, so there is benefit for you for doing that. Just want to close out by saying thank you again, and back to the video. Hopefully you're starting to see with just these few little numbers that Canada is in a bad way, but does it end there? Sadly, no. When we step a bit further back, we learn an even more interesting statistic, and that is that Canada has priced this moment into their economy for a long time. Another important thing that I want you to notice, if we go back to that first graph when it comes to spending, is that most of the spending is behind the economy. Prices have fallen if we look at the graphs objectively, but that doesn't seem to matter. Just like we saw with the United States, the pain of 2021 and 2022 is still harming the psyche of the Canadian consumer today. And it makes perfect sense why. After they were locked up during quarantine, they came back out and prices were more expensive. But the story doesn't even stop there. During this entire 9 years that Trudeau has been in office, he has decimated the previous merit-based immigration system that previous Canadian prime ministers and governments had put into place. Now, I'm not here to talk about immigration, but from an economic perspective, this is a problem. Immigration in Canada has doubled since Trudeau's appointment in 2015. This is where the problem lies. You see, in economics, we talk about supply and demand, but there's a deeper story to that. In each economy, there's only a certain amount of goods that can be produced with any given set of resources. When you double the amount of people in a given area, now you have twice as many people chasing those goods with their money, which drives prices through the roof. This explains the 18% that we're seeing in CPI, the 20% in housing, and the 17% increase in liters of gasoline. So despite the fact that Canadians are making more money per hour than they ever have before, they are paying more for everything than ever before and competing with twice the number of people. All this together, and it starts to make sense why people on TikTok are showing up to Trudeau on the street just to yell at him. And markets have done a similar thing. If we take a look at Canadian bond yields, we see a similar story. Starting back from 2022, when the prices started to fall again, the price for the 10-year bond rose 50%. to January of this month. And sure, the prices are starting to fall, but they remain elevated across all of the bond categories than they were prior to the pandemic. So what's going on here? There's lots of things that might be causing bond yields to rise in this way, but there's one that I feel fits this story more than any of the others. Increased risk. Markets started to see back in 2021 that the Trudeau regime was not working and risk was going up. So they priced it into the market. The final nail in the coffin for Trudeau's government. So what's next? Obviously, the resignation just 54 days prior to the next no confidence vote raises a problem for the Liberal Party. And I'm not gonna pretend to know what they're going to do. But as I've dug into this more over the past couple days, there's a clear winner in my head. Pierre Poilievre has solidified the emotions of the Canadian people. We saw this over and over again with his actions during the previous year, showing up at marches throughout Canada, visiting workers, and he is echoing the voices of what people have been saying on social media and in the Canadian public for years now, that prices are too high and it's time to bring them down. Moving into 2025, we are yet again seeing the exact same story played out. People are just not buying the narrative anymore. There is no recovery and things are still hard and they need to be fixed. We've seen this over and over and over again as different countries switch from their current incumbents to the opposite party. And Canada is just the next one in line to prove that. It's unclear who will replace him at this point. There are plenty of strong contenders in Trudeau's own party, and obviously we have Pierre Poilievre as well. All I hope is this. Whoever becomes the next Prime Minister, it's my hope that they learn from Trudeau's failures and listen when Conservatives say their quality of life is falling. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video today. If you found it helpful, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps the channel a lot. I don't know where this is going to end up, if we're just going to transfer this channel full-time into this, or if I'm going to move this to another channel, but hit the subscription bell so you stay up to date. Also, if you would like to read the article that I wrote on this particular issue, I will link it in the description, where you can also find the link for the newsletter itself. Thank you again, and have a wonderful rest of your January.